Every single building in South Africa, whether it's your home, your office, or the local shop, is governed by a pretty complex set of rules. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain and demystify the national building regulations. Think of this as your essential guide to understanding what keeps our buildings standing strong and our communities safe. Let's get right into it.
Okay, just imagine this for a second. You wake up one morning, look out the window, and your neighbor is laying the foundation for a, 50-story skyscraper in their backyard. What's actually stopping that from happening? Well, the answer is right there in the rules we're going to be exploring. These regulations aren't just boring documents for architects, they're literally the invisible framework that shapes how we live.
So, before we get into all the nitty-gritty details, let's start with the most basic question of all. Why do we even have these rules in the first place? What's the point? And the answer? Well, it gets to the very heart of what keeps us all safe and sound.
At its core, the mission is actually pretty simple, but it's incredibly powerful. These regulations exist for one main reason: to make sure that every single building provides a healthy and safe environment for the people inside. It's a fundamental promise, right? A promise of protection, whether you're at home, at work, or anywhere else.
Now, this is a really crucial point to understand. The national building regulations are a safety net. They set the minimum standard for health and safety. They are not, I repeat, not a guide on how to build a beautiful, comfortable, or amazing building. All that stuff, aesthetics, comfort, convenience, that's left up to designers and what the market wants. So the key takeaway here, just because a building is compliant, it doesn't mean it's a great building, it just means it's safe.
All right, this next part is where things can get a little confusing for people. But don't worry, we're going to make it super simple. There are two main documents you really need to know about. There's the Act and there's the Standard. Let's break down what each one does.
The easiest way to think about it is like this. The Act is the rulebook. It's the law, the big picture framework that tells you what you need to achieve. Then you have SANS 10 for 100. That's the playbook. It's the super detailed technical guide that gives architects and builders the practical, deemed to satisfy ways of how to actually meet the rules in the Act. So one sets the goal, the other gives you the game plan to get there.
So, who are the actual people involved in all this? A building plan isn't just a piece of paper. There's a whole cast of characters involved, and each one has a really specific and important role to play. Let's meet the key players.
First up, we've got the local authority. This is your municipality, and you can think of them as the ultimate gatekeepers. They're the ones who receive all the building applications, they're the ones who consider them, and they have the final say on whether a project gets a green light. They are the official enforcers of the rules in their town or city.
Now, working for the local authority is the building control officer. This is the technical expert, the person on the ground. They're the ones who pore over the plans to check if everything is up to code, they make a formal recommendation, and, this is key, they go out and do inspections during construction to make sure what's being built is exactly what was approved.
And last but definitely not least, we have the owner, the person whose name is on the title deed. And listen, this is a critical point. Even with an approved plan from the municipality, the owner is ultimately responsible for making sure their building follows the law. Getting that stamp of approval doesn't get you off the hook. The buck truly stops with the owner.
Okay, so we know why the rules exist and who the key players are. Now, let's walk through the how. What's the actual journey a project takes from just being a drawing to becoming a legally approved building? The path to approval is actually a pretty clear 5-step process. It all kicks off when the owner submits their application. From there, the building control officer does their review and makes a recommendation. Based on that, the local authority gives the official thumbs up or thumbs down. Then, as construction gets going, the officer does their inspections. And finally, once the project is finished and everything's in order, the local authority issues the single most important document of all, the certificate of occupancy.
And you really can't overstate the legal weight of that final certificate. Seriously, without it, you cannot legally live in, work in, or use a building. Period. It's the official stamp that confirms the building meets all the legal standards for safety. It really is the final, essential piece of the entire puzzle.
So, to wrap things up, let's just zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture. Because these regulations, they're not just a static set of rules. They're actually part of a much larger conversation about the kind of country we all want to build and live in.
This quote from the source material is just so insightful, it really hits the nail on the head. It reminds us that compliance is the floor, it's not the ceiling. A building can tick every single legal box and still not be a place you'd actually want to be in. The regulations guarantee safety, sure, but it's up to designers, builders, and owners to create spaces with quality, with inspiration, places where people can really thrive.
And it's also important to know that these regulations are not set in stone. They change, they evolve. A great example is how they've responded to the need for affordable housing. A new Category 1 for smaller buildings, under 80 square meters, was introduced. This allows for slightly different requirements to make housing more accessible, but without ever compromising on those core safety standards.
And that really leaves us with a crucial question for the future, doesn't it? As South Africa's needs continue to evolve, how do we strike that perfect balance between the vital safety net of these regulations and the urgent, growing demand for affordable, sustainable, and truly innovative housing? Finding that balance, well, that's one of the biggest challenges that's going to shape our country for generations to come. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.